D.C.
For too long, the federal government has used the power of the state as a weapon against people of faith, bullying and even punishing Americans for following their religious beliefs. That is why I am signing today an executive order to defend the freedom of religion and speech in America, the freedoms that we've wanted, the freedoms that you fought for so long.
That was President Trump Thursday, celebrating the first National Day of Prayer of his presidency, with a new executive order that loosens a 63-year-old prohibition of tax-exempt organizations like churches actively vouching for or against a political candidate. The irony of this order is not lost on yours truly, as I was endorsed by at least 2 churches during my 2004 presidential run, and you can believe that the IRS went after them with the quickness. While President Trump got to look the part of offending religious, quote, freedom this week, this one could come back to bite him, because we've seen churches across the country defy this administration on everything from sanctuary for documented immigrants to the proposed travel ban on Muslim countries. Joining me now is Reverend Michael Walrond, Jr., Senior Pastor of First Corinthian Baptist Church in Harlem, and from Washington, D.C., Sara Posner, writer for the Investigative Fund at the Nation Institute. Sara, let me ask you first. This came out as a weaker proclamation than expected, so much so the ACLU said we're not even suing it. They thought it was going to be geared more toward the LGBTQ community in terms of what some of the religious institutions are raising against having access to them or fairness for them.
Yes, it is a much more scaled back version of a leaked executive order draft that I reported on back in February. And despite the fact that a lot of people are saying it's a big nothing burger, or the ACLU has decided not to sue on it right now, I think it does raise cause for concern. Not only the provision that purports to repeal the Johnson Amendment, the part of the Internal Revenue Code that you were just discussing, you know, while he can't do that by executive order because it's part of a statute, it does signal what he's going to tell his Internal Revenue Service to do or not do with regard to pastor endorsements or non-endorsements of candidates.
Let me stop you right there, because Reverend Walrond, early the morning of the signing, you called me. We are early morning risers, and we talked. And raised that this could backfire on him. Let me show people what he said that brought me right back to Reverend Mike Walrond.
There is no greater example than the historic role of the African American church as the agent for social progress, spurring our nation to greater justice and equality. Over 60 years ago, the IRS went after one of the greatest leaders in history, Reverend Martin Luther King, Jr. It is a sobering reminder of the need for vigilance.
Now, you pastor the fastest growing church probably in this region, and you have been very political, very progressive in a lot of stands. And as I stated, people got in trouble for endorsing or even having people like me and others in their pulpit if we were running for office or even doing with a cause. Yeah. You're saying that even though this may have been weak, it may send a signal to the IRS they can't mess with progressive ministers.
Yeah, I mean, what he seeks to do is kind of lessen the attack that the IRS can make on certain churches, or churches in general, or religious organizations, which could backfire. For example, we all know the problem is that people are fearful that churches can become extremely partisan or a pawn in partisan politics, but it also could create a space where churches can, or pastors can even be more direct in their support or endorsement of candidates, and that could mean that you could actually have some pastors who could be very vocal in their opposition from the pulpit in the political way against President Trump. Now, that could backfire. If we think about the role that the African-American church plays in African-American communities as the center socially, politically, spiritually, and people in some ways take their direction or directives from their spiritual leader, their pastors. If pastors can now speak freely or have the opportunity to speak freely without attribution, it could backfire on Trump in many ways.
And if the signal is sent to the IRS that you can't mess with them, or if you do, that you're going against the president's executive order, this could have impact on a lot of the social movements that we see and that many of us involved in. And it could have impact on the midterm elections next year.
Yeah, it could have an impact, but if you think about this part of it, Rev, in the 63 years since the Johnson Amendment, only one religious organization has lost their tax-exempt status, the Branch Ministry, I think, in 1992, prior to the election of Bill Clinton. And so it could, but the IRS doesn't go after religious organizations very vigorously, except for certain cases like when you ran for president. But
I wonder why. but Beth, at the same time, that it may backfire, we still need your warning. We still need to be careful of the intent here and what the right wing is going to try to do, because I don't want to give people a rosy picture. There is some light in the clouds here, but there's still a lot of clouds.
Well, certainly, I don't think President Trump was really thinking about, even though he referenced the role of African-American churches in politics and social justice issues, he was primarily thinking about the white evangelical megachurch pastors who endorsed him with no consequence during his 2016 campaign.
Endorsed him from their pulpits, Sarah.
In some cases.
From their pulpits in some cases.
In some cases. And so this is really, he's really doing the bidding of the religious right, who has claimed with this red herring that their free speech and their freedom to religion rights are being infringed upon by the Johnson Amendment. The Johnson Amendment does no such thing. It merely says, if you want to maintain your tax-exempt status, you cannot use your tax-exempt dollars to endorse political candidates, or in the case of the 1992 case that the Reverend referred to, not endorse a candidate. But, the IRS has not been enforcing this.
Right.
They have not been investigating.
But now
pastors
now the optics even changed for the IRS because, Reverend Walrond, I always say the Christian right needs to meet the right Christians. We may see that showdown now, because now the threat, some of your colleagues in pastoring, I preach everywhere, but you pastor one of the major churches, they can't even say to you, well, I'm afraid what the IRS may do. That's gone now by at least the optics here. Yeah,
if it's really relaxed, this regulatory relief, so to speak, if it's relaxed, yes, it gives some pastors a right to step into it even more. I heard one person say that what President did on Thursday was an elaborate photo op with no real policy outcome. In some ways, yes. But even just the language itself can free up some spaces. Franklin Graham even referred to the fact that African-American churches have had politicians speaking for years, and that's the case. Although very few have actually done direct endorsements for the pulpit, because the thinking
even when they ran,
like when I ran, because the thinking is, well, they may not go after the white evangelicals, but they surely may come after some African-American churches who may breach that Johnson Amendment.
And I'm a witness that they have. Well, I'm going to have to leave it there. I know you have to get to church, and Sara has to get to work. Thank you both, Senior Pastor of 1 Corinthians, Michael Walrond, and Sara Posner.